In a bustling city filled with towering skyscrapers and gleaming offices, there was a factory unlike any other. This factory was known far and wide for its complex machinery, machines so intricate and powerful that only a handful of engineers could understand them. Among all these machines, one engine stood out. It was called the Impossible Engine because no one could fix it. For years, it had been breaking down, stalling production, and frustrating even the best mechanics in the company. At the heart of this story was a young woman named Emily. She wasn't an engineer or a mechanic. In fact, she was the daughter of the janitor who kept the factory clean. Every day, Emily would watch the engineers come and go, dressed in their crisp uniforms, carrying their tools, and talking in technical language she barely understood. But Emily had something different, a curiosity that couldn't be tamed, and a sharp mind that often surprised those who knew her. Her father, Mr. Clark, had worked at the factory for over 20 years. He was quiet, humble, and well-liked by everyone. He often told Emily stories about the machines, about how things worked, and about the importance of patience and attention to detail. Those stories planted a seed in Emily's mind, a desire to understand the mysteries hidden inside the machines that shaped the factory's success. One day, the factory CEO, Mr. Grayson, announced a company-wide meeting. His reputation was that of a strict, no-nonsense leader who demanded results. Employees listened carefully whenever he spoke, knowing his words could mean the difference between success and failure. This meeting was about the impossible engine. Again, production delays were mounting, and the pressure was on to find a solution. As Mr. Grayson stood at the podium, he spoke in a tone that was both frustrated and determined. "This engine has caused us nothing but trouble," he said. "Our best engineers have tried and failed to fix it. We can't afford more downtime. It's time for a fresh perspective. If anyone thinks they can solve this, step forward." Silence filled the room. No one dared to speak up. The impossible engine had a reputation. After all, it was almost a legend. No one wanted to risk their reputation on a failure. Then, unexpectedly, Emily stepped forward. The room gasped. The janitor's daughter? What did she know about engines? Mr. Grayson raised an eyebrow, but didn't stop her. "Go on, Emily," he said. "What makes you think you can fix what the experts can't?" Emily took a deep breath. She didn't have a formal education in engineering, but she had spent years observing, listening, and learning in her own way. "I don't claim to be an expert," she said, her voice steady, "but I've watched the engine closely during my time here. I believe there's something no one has noticed yet. If you give me the chance, I want to take a look." The room was tense. Some employees exchanged doubtful looks. Others whispered quietly, wondering if this was a joke or a bold move. Mr. Grayson, however, saw something in Emily's eyes, a spark, a determination he hadn't seen in a long time. "All right," he said, "you have 1 week. Fix the engine or don't come back." The week that followed was filled with curiosity and quiet anticipation. Emily worked alongside the engineers, sometimes asking simple questions that made the experts pause and think. She touched parts of the engine no one else dared to examine. She took notes, sketched diagrams, and tested small adjustments. Her approach was different, patient, careful, and creative. Slowly, her presence began to shift the atmosphere in the factory. The engineers who had once dismissed her started to listen. They watched as Emily's insights, though untrained, started revealing new angles. She didn't rush. She observed patterns. She asked questions about why the engine behaved a certain way, and she wasn't afraid to admit when she didn't know something. By the end of the week, whispers spread to the factory. Maybe the janitor's daughter really could do what no one else had. People began to hope. But would her boldness be enough to solve the mystery of the impossible engine? Emily spent hours in the dimly lit workshop, eyes fixed on the impossible engine. Its complicated parts seemed to mock her. So many bolts, wires, and tubes twisting into each other like a puzzle that refused to be solved. The engineers had tried everything. They had replaced parts, recalibrated systems, and studied blueprints for months. But every time they thought they fixed it, the engine broke down again, sometimes in ways no one expected. But Emily saw things differently. She didn't rush in with loud tools or complicated jargon. Instead, she listened. The engine made noises, clicks, hums, and occasional pops That told a story if you paid attention. She spent time just sitting nearby, taking notes about the sounds and vibrations. Her father's lessons about patience and observation echoed in her mind. Machines, like people, had rhythms, she thought. You just had to understand their language. One afternoon, while others were out on lunch, Emily noticed something strange. A small valve near the engine's core wasn't opening fully. It wasn't broken, just stuck halfway, like it was tired or reluctant. No one had mentioned it before because it wasn't obvious in the blueprints or the usual inspections. But for Emily, it was a clue. She carefully adjusted the valve, testing how it responded. The engine sputtered but didn't die. It was the first sign of life in weeks. Emily's heart raced. Maybe she was on to something. The next day, Emily shared her observations with a group of skeptical engineers. She explained how the valve's partial blockage could cause the engine to stall unpredictably, especially under heavy loads. They were quiet for a moment. One of the senior engineers scratched his head and said, "We never look closely at that valve. It's usually automatic." With renewed energy, the team started inspecting the valve and surrounding parts in detail. Sure enough, they found tiny particles of debris lodged inside, blocking its full movement. It was a small thing, but the effects were huge. Emily suggested cleaning and lubricating the valve, then testing the engine under different conditions. The engineers worked alongside her, impressed by her careful approach. For once, the impossible engine showed signs of cooperation. It ran longer without stalling, smoother and steadier than before. But the problem wasn't entirely solved. Emily knew there was more beneath the surface. She went back to studying the engine's design, focusing on the connections between the valve and the rest of the system. The factory's old manuals were thick and complicated, but she didn't give up. She took it one page at a time, breaking down the technical terms into ideas she could understand. In the process, she discovered something no one else had noticed. The engine's control system was outdated. It couldn't properly communicate with the newer parts that had been added over the years. Signals were delayed, causing the engine to misfire or shut down at random moments. Emily proposed an idea that surprised even the lead engineer. Instead of replacing the whole system, what if they updated the control software with a custom patch? It would be simpler, cheaper, and faster than a complete overhaul. The engineers were intrigued but cautious. It was a risky move. With permission from Mr. Grayson, the CEO, the team set to work on the software update. Emily helped test each change, noting how the engine responded. It was a slow process full of trial and error, but gradually the engine started to behave differently. One morning, after a late night of work, Emily and the engineers watched the engine run for an hour without a single hiccup. The impossible engine was alive, really alive, for the first time in years. There was cheering, clapping, and even a few high fives. Emily smiled quietly, feeling proud but humble. Word spread quickly through the factory. The janitor's daughter had cracked a code that experts couldn't. The impossible engine was no longer impossible. But more than that, Emily had shown something powerful. Sometimes fresh eyes, curiosity, and patience mattered more than experience or titles. The factory buzzed with new energy. The production line was back on track, and morale soared. Mr. Grayson called a special meeting to announce the success and to recognize Emily's contributions. He stood before the crowd and said, "Today, we witnessed the power of determination and fresh perspective. Emily didn't just fix the engine. She reminded us all that brilliance can come from the most unexpected places." Emily's life was about to change, but she remained the same curious girl who watched machines closely and never stopped asking questions. The impossible had been overcome, but the journey was far from over. There was still so much to learn and discover. After the engine's long-awaited success, the factory felt different. A new kind of energy filled the air. Not just a hum of machines running smoothly, but a sense of possibility. Emily's quiet confidence had stirred something in everyone. People began to look at their work and each other in a new light. For Emily, the days that followed were a whirlwind of attention she hadn't expected. Engineers who once barely glanced her way now asked for her thoughts. The factory workers stopped by to say congratulations, and even the cleaning crew gave her nods of respect. But through it all, Emily stayed grounded. She still arrived early, swept floors alongside her father, and listened closely to machines that had become her teachers. One afternoon, the CEO, Mr. Grayson, invited Emily to his office. The room was large and intimidating, filled with polished furniture and important-looking documents. But Emily didn't hesitate. She walked in with her usual calm, her mind full of ideas. "Emily," Mr. Grayson began, "what you did with the engine, it was remarkable. But I want to know more. How do you see things differently? What's your approach?" Emily thought for a moment. "I guess I just try not to be afraid to ask questions. Sometimes, when you don't have all the answers, you look closer, you listen more carefully. I don't come from the world of engineers, so I don't get caught up in what should be. I just see what is." Mr. Grayson smiled. "That's rare wisdom. We could use more of that around here." Word of Emily's success even reached beyond the factory walls. Local newspapers ran stories about the janitor's daughter, who fixed the impossible engine. Interviews followed, and Emily found herself explaining her journey to curious reporters. She spoke simply, always giving credit to her father's lessons and the team who helped along the way. But the real surprise came during a company-wide meeting a few weeks later. Mr. Grayson stood in front of the crowd and said something no one expected. "We need to change how we do things here," he declared. "Emily showed us that fresh perspectives can unlock solutions we've missed for years. Starting now, we're opening our doors to new voices from every level of this company." That announcement shook the room. For years, the factory had been a place where roles were clear and rigid. Now, suddenly, ideas could come from anyone. The culture began to shift. Teams started holding brainstorming sessions where no question was too simple and no suggestion was ignored. People who once felt invisible found their voices. Emily became a quiet leader, not because she sought power, but because people trusted her curiosity and clarity. She was asked to join meetings, to help design training programs, and to mentor younger workers. But she never lost a sense of wonder that had brought her this far. One day, as Emily walked to the factory floor, she noticed something new. A small group of young workers gathered around a machine, talking excitedly. She smiled as she approached. They were asking questions, sharing ideas, and trying things out without fear of failure. Emily saw herself in them, and it warmed her heart. Outside the factory, Emily's story inspired others too. Schools invited her to speak to students about following their curiosity and never underestimating themselves. Community groups reached out, hoping to learn from the changes she helped bring about. Emily understood that her journey wasn't just about fixing an engine. It was about breaking down walls and opening doors. Despite all the attention, Emily remained humble. She still found joy in simple things, watching the sunset over the city, helping her father in the garden, and listening to the quiet whispers of machines at work. Her success had shown her a new world of possibilities, but she never forgot where she came from. And as the factory continued to thrive, one thing became clear. Sometimes, the greatest solutions come not from the loudest voices or the biggest titles, but from those who see the world with fresh eyes and an open heart. Emily's journey was just beginning, and everyone who knew her wondered what incredible things she would discover next. The buzz around Emily's success didn't fade as the weeks passed. In fact, it only grew louder. Employees who once doubted her started to see the value of fresh perspectives. It was like a door had been unlocked, one that led to new ways of thinking and solving problems. The impossible engine was just the beginning. The factory itself seemed to breathe a little easier, its heartbeat steadier and stronger. Emily found herself invited into spaces she'd never imagined. Meetings with senior engineers, discussions about upcoming projects, and even brainstorming sessions where her ideas were not only heard but welcomed. It was a strange feeling for her, shifting from being the janitor's daughter who quietly observed from the sidelines to someone who played a real part in shaping the future of the company. She still remembered the moment when she first stepped forward at that company meeting, volunteering to tackle the impossible engine. Back then, it had felt risky, almost reckless. But now, with the weight of her small victory behind her, Emily understood something important. It wasn't just about fixing machines. It was about courage, about trusting in one's own perspective even when others doubted you. One morning, as Emily walked to the factory, She noticed a group of engineers gathered around a new piece of equipment. This machine was different, sleek, modern, and full of advanced technology. It was a kind of innovation the company had been working toward for years, but no one had quite cracked the code on how to integrate it smoothly into existing systems. Curious, Emily paused and listened. The engineers talked about the machine's sensors, its software, and the delicate balance required to keep everything running perfectly. The usual technical terms swirled around her, but this time she felt more confident. She knew enough now to ask the right questions. Stepping forward, she said quietly, "Have you thought about how this new machine will affect the older equipment nearby? Maybe there's something about the interaction between the two that's causing these glitches." Heads turned. The lead engineer, a man named Robert, looked surprised but intrigued. "We focus mostly on the new machine itself," he admitted. "But you might be right. Sometimes it's the connections we overlook that cause the biggest problems." Emily smiled. It was a small moment, but it showed just how far she'd come. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She was part of the team, helping to solve problems from angles others hadn't considered. Over the next few days, Emily worked closely with Robert and the engineers. She brought her natural curiosity and patience to the process, asking questions about workflows and machine behavior that led to unexpected discoveries. One of these was a subtle timing issue in the system's software that was causing the sensors to misread signals from the older machines. The fix wasn't complicated. It was a small adjustment in the way the machines communicated with each other. But without that fresh perspective, no one had seen it before. As the factory ran smoother, the culture continued to evolve. Mr. Grayson, the CEO, made good on his promise to open the company's doors to new voices. He encouraged employees from all levels to contribute ideas, creating an environment where everyone felt they could make a difference. For Emily, this meant more opportunities to learn and grow. She started taking classes in mechanical engineering and software basics, determined to build on the foundation she created. Her father, proud and supportive, often reminded her to keep that same mix of humility and curiosity that had brought her this far. Outside work, Emily's story inspired many. Local schools invited her to speak to students, sharing her journey and encouraging them to believe in themselves, no matter their background. Community groups reached out, hoping to learn how to foster creativity and problem-solving in their own spaces. But amid all the attention and new responsibilities, Emily stayed grounded. She still enjoyed the quiet moments, watching the sun rise over the factory, helping her father with the cleaning, and listening to the gentle hum of machines in the background. One evening, as she sat on the porch after a long day, Emily thought about what lay ahead. The impossible engine had been fixed and the factory was thriving, but she knew the journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, machines to understand, and new ideas to explore. Most of all, Emily knew that her greatest strength was not just in fixing engines or solving problems, but in seeing the world differently and having the courage to speak up when it mattered most. The days after the engine was fixed brought a wave of unexpected changes, not just inside the factory, but for Emily herself. She was no longer just a janitor's daughter, quietly watching from the sidelines. Now, she was someone people looked up to, someone whose ideas sparked real progress. But with that new attention came new challenges. Not everyone was ready to accept her. Some of the engineers who had once scoffed at her presence now kept their distance, whispering behind her back. Old habits and old attitudes died hard. The factory was a place where tradition ruled, and for many, Emily's sudden rise felt like a disruption they weren't sure how to handle. Still, Emily didn't let the negativity stop her. She knew the value of patience and persistence. She kept showing up early, asking questions, learning from everyone she could, and never losing sight of what mattered, solving problems and making things better. Her father's quiet encouragement was always there, reminding her that every small step forward counted. One afternoon, a crisis hit. A critical machine in the factory suddenly broke down, threatening to shut down the whole production line. Panic spread quickly. The engineers scrambled to diagnose the issue, but none of their usual fixes worked. Time was running out. Emily was nearby, observing quietly as tensions rose. She remembered something she had read about a similar machine and thought about the connections between its parts, especially the delicate balance between mechanical and electronic systems. Without hesitation, she stepped forward. "Can I take a look?" she asked calmly. Some heads turned skeptically, but the lead engineer nodded, desperate for solutions. Emily examined the machine carefully. She noticed a small, overlooked sensor that seemed misaligned. It wasn't broken, just out of place. If it couldn't read correctly, the machine would shut down as a safety measure. With steady hands, Emily adjusted the sensor. The machine hummed back to life. Relief washed over the room. The production line was saved. That moment changed things. More people began to realize that Emily's unique perspective wasn't just luck. It was a powerful asset. She didn't just see what was wrong. She understood how the pieces fit together in ways others missed. Word of her quick thinking reached Mr. Grayson, who invited her to join a new innovation team tasked with improving factory processes. The team included engineers, designers, and software developers. Emily felt nervous but excited. It was an opportunity to learn, to contribute, and to push boundaries. The team's first project was ambitious. Redesign a part of the factory's production system to be more efficient and adaptable. Meetings were full of technical discussions, diagrams, and debates. Emily listened carefully, asking questions that helped clarify complex ideas. She suggested simple but effective changes, like reorganizing workflows and adding clearer signals between machines. Her ideas sparked conversations and inspired others to think differently. Slowly, the team developed a plan that combined technology with practical adjustments on the floor. Emily's voice had become part of the conversation, and it mattered. Outside the factory, Emily's story continued to inspire. She was invited to speak at local schools and community centers, encouraging young people to trust their curiosity and keep learning. Her message was clear. You don't have to come from a fancy background or have all the answers to make a difference. Back at home, Emily stayed close to her roots. She spent evenings helping her father around the house, enjoying simple moments of laughter and shared stories. She knew that success wasn't just about recognition. It was about staying true to yourself and the people who believe in you. But even as things settled, new challenges awaited. The factory was growing, new technologies were arriving, and the pace of change was faster than ever. Emily realized that learning was a lifelong journey. Every solved problem opened the door to new questions. And through it all, one thing remained constant: Emily's determination to listen, observe, and never stop asking why. That quiet strength had transformed her life and the factory itself, proving that sometimes the biggest changes come from the most unexpected places. It had been months since Emily first stepped up and proved herself, and yet the ripple effects kept growing. People throughout the company were still talking about the moment she fixed the engine no one else could. But now, her presence had become something even more powerful, expected, normal, respected. What started as a moment of shock had settled into a steady rhythm of trust. Emily now walked through the factory with a quiet confidence. She still wore the same simple clothes, still arrived early with her father, still preferred listening over talking. But her role had expanded in ways she never could have imagined. She wasn't just helping fix problems anymore. She was part of designing the future of the factory. Her place on the innovation team had opened new doors. She'd begun working closely with developers and automation experts, learning how software interacted with hardware, how data from machines could guide decisions, and how even a small adjustment in coding could transform efficiency. While others had degrees and experience, Emily brought something different, a fresh eye and relentless curiosity. One morning, the team faced a new challenge. The company had just invested in a line of robotic arms to speed up production. On paper, the tech was flawless. But in practice, things weren't running as smoothly. The timing was off, the arms misaligned with the conveyor system, and errors piled up faster than anyone expected. Meetings were tense. The engineers tried recalibrating the code. The operators adjusted the speeds, but nothing stuck. Everyone had their own theory, and frustration boiled beneath the surface. That's when Emily spoke up, not loudly, not with force, but with a thoughtful question. "Have we checked that the arms are reacting to sound?" she asked. The room went quiet. She explained that during her observation, She noticed the arms hesitated slightly whenever loud machinery started nearby. No one had noticed before. They were too focused on the programming, on numbers and patterns. But Emily had seen how the machine paused, how its sensor seemed thrown off by vibrations or noise. A few hours later, after some tests, her hunch was confirmed. The robotic arms weren't just misaligned. They were reacting to ambient interference. The fix? Simple sound dampeners and a small software delay to account for timing disruptions. Just like that, the entire system began to run smoothly. The room erupted in cheers, but Emily just smiled. For her, it wasn't about credit. It was about solving puzzles, about helping the machines and the people work in harmony. That solution led to something bigger. Mr. Grayson pulled her aside and offered her a position she hadn't even dreamed of, a lead role in a pilot project to redesign the company's training program. He wanted new hires, from engineers to floor workers, to learn the way Emily did, through observation, questions, and hands-on problem-solving. It was a huge task, but Emily didn't hesitate. She remembered what it felt like to be the invisible one, the girl in the background no one expected anything from. She wanted to build a space where everyone, no matter their title or background, could contribute. She worked late nights writing modules, creating real-life problem scenarios, and inviting others to help her shape the curriculum. And she made sure the first lesson was always this: don't assume you don't belong. Curiosity and patience can solve anything. Soon, the training program began rolling out. New hires were energized. Older employees volunteered to mentor. The gap between departments started to close. People talked more, asked more, shared more. The factory felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. Emily's father watched it all with quiet pride. Every evening they'd talk about her day, about the breakthroughs and the setbacks, and about how far she'd come. He never said much, but his eyes always said everything. Even with her new responsibilities, Emily still spent time on the floor, walking the rows of machines, pausing to listen. It wasn't just habit. It was how she connected with the work. With every hum and click, she heard a story, a problem waiting for a solution, a chance to learn something new. There were still doubters, of course. Some questioned her lack of formal education. Others couldn't accept how fast she had risen. But Emily never wasted energy on them. She let her work speak for itself. Every solution, every improvement, every moment of growth, it all added up. And quietly, steadily, people began to follow her lead.